This is the Fixer Punk Podcast. I'm Grayson Peltier. This episode is going to be a quicker episode, partially because I have some really good pro wrestling to watch. AEW tonight, and this weekend is AEW Revolution, and if you're looking for my wrestling analysis, I have some analysis on one of the best matches you're going to see that night, which is Jon Moxley versus Hangman Adam Page, discussing the concept of redemptive combat and the way that this particular storyline can really help men that are looking for redemption. It gives us a lot of ideas and hints about the idea of redemption and fighting for what you actually want in life as a means of improving your mental health. I have that analysis up on prowrestlingmusings.com. You can probably also find it pinned to my Twitter at GraysonNation, GreysonNation. But for those of you who are here for what this episode actually is going to be about, I am doing this sort of in response to the huge amount of response that I got on a video about the student loan debt forgiveness oral arguments in the Supreme Court. And basically what I explained was that the conservative supermajority Supreme Court doesn't want student loan debt forgiveness. And they're saying, well, it's not fair because there are people who don't have student loans, people who paid off their student loans. And trying to say that this has to be done through an act of Congress when the authority is already in the law and there's already broad discretion to be able to forgive loans that is given to the executive branch. And I compared it to the fact that the government decides voluntarily through an administrative action, because the action of a taxing agency like the IRS, that is an administrative function within the executive branch of government. The IRS is part of the executive branch of government. So is Joe Biden. So is the Secretary of Education. That's the executive branch of government deciding on their own to not pursue recovery of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars of tax debt that is owed by millionaires, billionaires, other people in the top 1% and 5% of the country who can afford to pay that money and who legally owe it according to laws set forth by Congress. Yet that is effectively forgiven, that much money every single year. The student loan debt forgiveness is only a one-time thing. So it's not like this is unprecedented or somehow unfair. The government lets go of all this money from its coffers all the time. But that's sort of beside the point of what I want to bring up here, which is I got a ton of negative comments on that video. A lot of positive ones. Thank you, everybody, for the positive feedback as well, the people who are frustrated with the system. But a lot of intense and fiery debate. And a lot of people kept coming back to these concepts of, well, and I'm assuming that the people in my TikTok comments aren't multimillionaires. They aren't rich people. I am hoping, sometimes against hope, that they don't work for right-wing organizations, or they're not trolls or bots or chat GPT systems in the basement of the Koch brothers' offices. But they keep coming back to these concepts of like responsibility and character, and you took out a loan, you should have to pay it back. You took out a loan, you should have to pay it back. Why would I be responsible for having to pay back your loan? And I think that we need to have a bit of a discussion. I haven't really had this discussion on this show yet, of why normal everyday people act against their own interests, or why they oppose policies that help others and that can help them. Why working class people go against their class interest in a very basic way when it comes to public policy. And I think the first obstacle is when we talk about these things like responsibility and character. These are concepts of morality, but they're also concepts of superiority. And a lot of conservative dialogue, a lot of it is tied to moral values. You have terms like the moral majority, stuff like that have to do with social issues, but they also deal with the economic issues too. people want to feel like they are better than somebody else. And being able to stand on a pedestal and say, look, I paid off my student loan debt. I have no debt. I'm paying all this money. Look, I have a job. I have a house that's paid off. I have money in the bank. You can't take it from me. Even though that same person could lose their job tomorrow, be hit by a car, and have hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt that they're going to need to get forgiven through bankruptcy. And policies would help them in certain ways when we're talking about, probably in the education context, certainly there are people that are paying on their student loans and all that. But it could be any one of our family members who could have that type of circumstance. There are situations where people would just go in there and say, you took out a loan, pay it back. And it's ridiculous to even think, like, these are probably, and the thing is that the conservative people, especially, that are pitching these ideas of like morality and responsibility, and you have to pay all your money back. You have to be super frugal. You have to just pay every dime the bank wants you to pay back at all times, no matter how much it hurts you, no matter what you have to do to yourself. You have to live in a cardboard box and send all your money to the bank to pay back a loan. You should do that because it's your moral responsibility. The people who pitch that, they're not doing that themselves. They, number one, don't have to because they're making enough money from grifting that they don't have to. But they don't follow. They have gotten the relief themselves. Dave Ramsey is probably the biggest perpetrator in this, and he admits they filed for bankruptcy. They stiffed a lot of people on a bunch of loans, made his money, a lot of it from borrowing money, which he says not to do. But it's this sort of sense of morality that it seeks to take you away from doing what you know instinctively is right. Because if this was your family member who was barely able to make ends meet because they have all these high student loan payments, they're paying out 50, 60, 70% of their income in student loan payments every month. You have people who have to pay that percentage, 70% in rent, and then adding the student loan payment on that. That means that they have little money left over for anything else, like food, gas to put in their car, health insurance, all the things you need in life, because they have to pay a high amount in rent and they have high student loans too. So they're stuck. People that are not able to move on in their lives. You would think the logical thing to do to help that person is to help them out of that situation. But when we think of it on a policy level, we start thinking of these tropes and these ideas that have been implanted in us of like morality and responsibility. Meanwhile, this has no moral consequence on anybody. I had somebody in my comments who was like, well, when you have student loan debt being forgiven, that's paying back their debt with my money. They're taking my earnings. I noticed this person used the term earnings specifically to pay for their debt. And that's not how any of this works. Obviously, I don't have time to go into a full explanation of modern monetary theory here, but the whole home budget analogy theory of politics is wrong. The government has different ways of manipulating money that are far different than how we handle things. And somebody else pointed out in my comment section that the cost of student loans has already been paid back by the interest that people have already paid on it. I have to go and fact check that, but it almost sounds feasible. So it's not like it's actually costing citizens any money to do this. And it's not like we're actually spending money. And the reason why the president is able to do this is because it's not money that we are spending on a budget level. It's money that has been dispersed and that is going to be forgiven for the purpose of providing relief after a global pandemic that hurt a lot of people economically, which is what the HEROES Act sought to do. So you have that sort of like, you have that indignation of thinking, well, I earned it. I earned this money and I am going to lose it to other people. And that's fear. That's a lot of fear. And people don't think about how this is going to impact. Obviously, they don't think about the personal impacts. They don't think about how it's going to impact other people because they are scared. They're like, they're thinking, why should I have to take care of other people because when I can't even take care of myself? Or I've earned this, why does anybody else have a right to it? But they don't understand that them, unless they are very extremely wealthy people, and the thing is that even with the student loan debt forgiveness, nobody's really getting tax increase from this. There's no tax increase tied to this thing. So even if you are making $1 million a year, this isn't going to actually hurt you in any way. But they think, well, I've got mine. Nobody should be able to take that from me, and it doesn't take from you. I think that in the article that I mentioned at the beginning of the article about the John Moxley-Adam Page feud, John Moxley has a quote that he said to CM Punk in a wrestling promo, and I think it's actually very apt. He said, fragile ego, fragile body, weak mind, weak spirit. And a lot of these people have fragile egos. And I know this is a little bit harsh, but people who have been conditioned to believe that if somebody else gets something in life that they need to support themselves, and you got it, you had to struggle for it, the other person didn't have to struggle as much for it. Just because we're making it fair now doesn't mean that you are any less of a person. It just means that we are now doing what is right. You fought for what was right for yourself and to make sure that you were taken care of. Now we are extending that privilege to other people so that things can get better for others. It does not negate your accomplishment. And of course, we have the temporarily embarrassed millionaire phenomenon. They think, oh yeah, I'm a really hard worker. One day I might become a millionaire who has to pay higher taxes. Maybe the proposal we're talking about does have higher taxes involved. Maybe the proposal we're talking about is an increase in the minimum wage. And you're thinking, oh yeah, one day I might start a business and I might have to pay people minimum wage. And I'm going to have to pay more then. But that's not you right now. And that is sort of an abstraction. Of course, I believe in having goals and dreaming big, but you have to think about what is actually going to help other people and what is actually going to be even significant, because a minimum wage increases statistically don't actually hurt small business owners. But they're thinking of themselves in sort of a future self of that I'm going to be successful enough that this is going to affect me. And that allows them to feel like they are better than you, better than the person who has like an actual real understanding of, I have a job and I have a boss and that boss is against me, and I have debt and that debt may never go away no matter how hard I work, because there is a cap put on my wages by a system of employers who collude to keep those wages down. And that is the reality. And it hurts to know that. But you have to understand that, and being able to actually go in there, see it as that you're actually going in and you're fighting back against the problems that are keeping you down. You are fighting against that hold that is pushing you down. But you're keeping that hold on you right now because you believe that the way out of it is somehow unfair, or that you believe somebody else is going to do it in the future. It doesn't make sense. Take that pressure off of everybody, including yourself. And even if an issue is not affecting you right now, it has downstream effects on you. The fact that there are so many professionals out there with high student loan debt is reducing the availability of doctors, lawyers, all kinds of experts, even the people in the social sciences. We need people that have expertise in how people behave, how systems function, so that systems can run and actually help the people in society. And there's less of that. The next person who has a cure for cancer, the next great artist out there, that person is possibly sitting around in a job that they hate, working 2-3 jobs, not able to think as clearly and perform at their peak, educated person who went to college, they're not able to perform at their peak and do their best because they are under the weight of this student loan debt. But people don't have the foresight to think about that. They just think of, I got mine, they can't have theirs. And we're not taking anything from you. We're not taking anything from you. We are just making things better for others as well. If you got to where you got to, then we're proud of you. But we want to make sure that others can get there too. I was listening to the Rick Smith show, and he's saying, well, I just want to make sure that the ladder is big enough to let other people come up. And that's key, is that if you can believe that you can succeed and other people can succeed at the same time and not be afraid of that, that breaks a lot of this conditioning. And this is really a fear that is instilled by the upper class into people, of thinking that if we disrupt things, if we change things a little bit, anything we do to help others is going to somehow hurt you. They make you think of this as a zero-sum game, and that puts you into a state of fear. And when you're in fear, you're going to react. And when you react automatically, that automatic response is going to be based on things that you have heard and learned that have been drilled into your mind. And a lot of people have heard this conservative kind of responsibility kind of rhetoric all their lives. And the little side note that, oh yeah, that wealthy conservative commentator you listen to, they filed for bankruptcy twice. They've taken PPP loans on their business, had them forgiven. They have gotten tons of government assistance. When there was a Republican in office, some company they own got a contract. They've taken a lot of corporate welfare. That side note, even if they've heard it, is going to kind of stay down there. And when you're in fear, you're not going to access that part of your brain. You're going to think of the first thing that comes to mind, which is responsibility. They need to be more responsible, and it's not moral for their debt to be forgiven. You have to stay with that, because they've heard that 50,000 times a day on conservative talk radio. And we've talked about the problem of media that's biased, and they're thinking against their own interests. They're thinking of what they've heard before and what they've memorized, what's been drilled into them, and not what is actually going to help themselves or others around them. And what we can do is we want to make these things personalized. One of the first things I learned, actually, when I was doing campaign training with conservative organizations, was that you want to make things very personal. So you want to bring back that example of, what if this was your kid, your mom, your dad that owed money, that had to file for bankruptcy? What if this was your kid who had to take out student loans and can't pay them back, and they can't afford to live? They're deciding between paying for their student loans and being able to put gas in their car to get to work because their bosses are forcing them to come back into the office. They're deciding between their student loan and rent. Wouldn't you feel better for your family member, for your kid, for your mom, for your dad, for your sister, for your brother, if that load was relieved from them? This can help people in your own life, people in your community, people that you care about on a personal level. It could possibly even help you. This could help you because you will have more access to professionals and experts and people that can do things that can positively impact your life. Maybe the doctor or the dentist who had a ton of student loans, if we were to go a little further with the student loan debt forgiveness thing, they'd have more time to volunteer and to help out in programs in your community. Maybe they would be able to lower their prices a little bit. There are lots of possibilities when we open up and we start to help people actually reach their true potential by giving them the assistance they need. And if you can take that fear and think about what is actually going to happen when you do these things, and understand that that fear is being instilled in you by an outside source that does not want you meaning anybody who isn't like a multimillionaire, to succeed in life. They're people on the top that just want to keep staying on the top, and that's why they're funding all the propaganda that's going into your brain. once you take that and you convert that into creative flow of, okay, so this feels a little bit scary, this feels a little bit different, this forgiving student loan debt, this providing assistance to people, providing financial assistance to people, providing universal health care, providing housing assistance, this feels different. It feels a little scary. And I know it feels a little different, but you take that and you use that energy and you think about the possibilities of what is next and what can make your life better and make the lives of those around you who you care about better from making those changes. It makes a world of difference. All right, so I think that's a little bit of an overview of why people have policy positions that go against their own interests, why people oppose things that help others, and how to break out of that reactionary cycle of opposing things that can benefit you, others in your class, others in your family and community. If you have any input, any suggestions for future episodes, if you want to chew me out on a more personal level, you want to rant to me on a more personal level, you can call in. You can call 844-477-PUNK. That's 844-477-7865 and leave a voicemail message. I listen to all the voicemail messages, and I might even play your message on the podcast as well and respond to you as well. Please go and follow the TikTok at FixerPunk. That's where that student loan video that blew up and all the responses, and I really thank all the people who left positive, supportive comments there. Thank you so much. I love having you as part of our community. So go follow at FixerPunk on TikTok. Take a look at that video, and please make sure to like and share and keep the positivity up there so we can show people the good things that we can do in society when we decide to help people out a little bit. The Instagram's also at FixerPunk. The Twitter is at Grayson, Greyson, Nation, Nation. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you'll join me again for the next episode.